Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Precious Styling. In today's tutorial I'll be showing you how I made this stylish semi-open back shirt with drawstrings at the side and a notch collar, and this shirt can be styled in multiple ways. So guys, in the previous tutorial I showed you how I made the short, and in this video I'll be focusing on the shirt. So without delay, let's get creative. Would begin by drafting the front pattern of the shirt. I have this piece of fabric that is already folded inwards by 2.5 inches. I folded this 2.5 inches inwards on both sides with my pressing iron, and this piece of fabric would just be enough for the shirt, that's front part of the shirt, and that part I folded inwards would be the center front of the shirt. Sorry guys, but I'll be using this regular chalk to make my lines more visible instead of my tailor's chalk. So from the top of the fabric, I'm going to go down by 0.5 inch because that would be my starting line, and I'll be rolling a line there. Like I hinted earlier, this fabric is as wide as the widest part of my body, which is my hip circumference. So I used my hip circumference divided by 4 to cut out this fabric already. I only just added 1 inch to that measurement. So from the starting line, I'm going to go down to mark my chest line. I'm also going to go down from there and mark my bust line. I'm also going to go down from that same point and mark my waistline, and the last area would be the hem line of the shirt. So from the shoulder to the hem line, what I have is 26.5 inches. I'm going to be marking similar measurement on the other side of the fabric so that I can rule lines to connect all the points. Okay, let me just mark all these lines. So this right here is my chest line, this right here is my bust line, this right here is my waistline, and the last area is the hem of the shirt. This area on fold is the center front of the shirt, and that is where I would begin taking all my horizontal and circumferential body measurements from. So at the shoulder line, I'm going to be marking half of my shoulder span at 7 inches, and I'll be ruling a line from that 7 inches we marked at the shoulder to the chest line. Now we'll be marking our neck width and neck depth. So the neck width for the front pattern would be 3 inches wide, while the neck depth would be 3 inches deep. And I'll just use my curved ruler to draw out the neckline. On this straight line, I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope. So I want to create my armhole now. So at this chest line, I'm going to be marking my bust circumference divided by 4. So you divide your bust circumference by 4 and you mark that on that line. And at the straight line that runs from the shoulder line to the chest line, I'm going to be marking the midpoint of that line. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to be coming in from that point I marked on the vertical line by 0.5 inch, and then we'll be creating our armhole by connecting all those points we marked. Now is the time to shape up the shirt. This shirt would be a free shirt, okay, and remember that the width of the shirt is still my hip circumference. Okay, so at the waistline, I'm just going to come in by 1.5 inches, and I'm going to be connecting the sides of the shirt to that part we marked on the waistline, and I would also be connecting the marked area on the waistline to the hem of the shirt. So at the hemline, I want to give this right angle a rounded edge, so I'm just going to come up at the slant by 1.5 inches, and I'll just curve that to the hem of the shirt. I will just be adding 0.5 inch to the shoulder for stitching allowance, and I'll just cut out everything. You probably would have seen some shirts having the back fabric coming to the front section of the shirt, something like a come down. Yes, that is what I want to do. So I would be having a come down of the back fabric of about 1 inch. So I'm going to mark 1 inch from the shoulder. I'm just going to be marking 1 inch below. I'm going to mark that on the other side as well, and I'm going to be ruling a line. So because of this line that we ruled, which we would later cut out, would be having a come down from the back fabric to the front fabric with about 1 inch. And so I would cut it out. This is what I have when I open up the fabric. For the back pattern, I ruled a line from the shoulder line to the hem of the fabric at 26.5 inches, and you can see I left 0.5 inch allowance at the shoulder for formality. I'm going to be marking the neck width of the back neckline. So the neck width is 3 inches while the neck depth is 1 inch, and I'm also going to mark that there. So I'm just going to use my curved ruler to connect both points together. So guys, I'll be placing the front fabric we drafted on the back fabric, and I will just make sure that the hem of both fabrics align, okay, because the front and the back length would be the same thing. So remember that piece of fabric that we cut out, okay? Do not throw it away. So I put that piece of fabric on the shoulder. I just aligned it there so that it is at the same point with the shoulder line. By putting that at the shoulder line, that means that the back fabric is now equal to the initial front fabric. So we're going to place the second cutout of the front fabric at the shoulder as well. So you can see how I just put it there. I just put it there because now we're going to account for that cutout we made at the front so that the front and the back is not shortened. So let me just explain it. You see that I put one cutout first to make sure that the back is equal as the front, the way it was initially, okay? And now I'm just extending the line with 1.5 inches. Okay, because that was the cutout we made initially. So I'm just extending that shoulder line by 1.5 inches. I'll do that on both sides, and I will be connecting both points together with my roller. So in this way now, this additional extension we made will now make up for the cutout we made at the front. Thereby we'll be having that come down we said we wanted to have at the front, and that will run from the back. I don't know if you understand this explanation, but that is what I am doing. You will still see how this plays out eventually. So when I take out the cutout, this is what I have. You can see the extension at the shoulder. So I'm just taking my scissors and cut out the pattern using the front pattern as a guide. The back fabric is going to have a yoke, so I'm just going to be determining where the yoke is going to start from. So from the neckline, I went down by 5 inches, and I'm going to use my roller to find a common ground at the other side, and I'm going to roll a line from point A to point B. For the opening at the back, I'm going to move to the center back, and I'm going to mark 0.75 inch. You know this material is actually on fold. That means the opening at the back would be 1.5 inches. Now, if you want the opening at the back to be smaller, maybe around 1 inch, you can just mark 0.5 inch. But for me, I am marking 0.75 inch. I would be marking 0.75 inch on the hem as well, and I would be connecting both points with my roller. So now that this is done, I will be cutting out the yoke area, and I'll be cutting through the line I marked on the center back. So when I arrange the fabric, this is what I have, and you can see the partition at the center back. If this yoke was cut on fold, I would just be having a straight piece of fabric without any demarcation at the midsection, but I didn't cut it on fold. So right now I have cut out the yoke on another fabric, piece of fabric. At this other part, I also joined the midsection. I stitched it down so I have one straight piece, while this other part does not have any joining because I just cut it on a straight piece of fabric. So this one that doesn't have joining would be the main fabric, while I'll be using the yoke with the joining at the center back as the lining. Now I have this strip of fabric that I have already hemmed to give me a clean finish, and this strip of fabric is going to be divided into shorter strips. Now these shorter strips would intersect the partition at the center back in order to give us what we're trying to achieve. Now the length of each of these shorter strips would be 2.75 inches. The partition at the middle is 1.5 inches, but we are going to have extra at the sides for what we want to use it to do. So I'll just cut out that 2.75 inches there, and you'd further cut out additional shorter strips that would be enough for the back. Now we're going to be determining the spaces in between the shorter strips. So from the yoke area, I'm going to be going down by 2 inches, and from there I would also go down by 2 inches till I get to the hem of the shirt. I will also be using my ruler to mark out the 2 inches gap on the other side of the fabric. Now I'll be placing the midpoint of the shorter strip of fabric on the points we marked, and I'll just be pinning it down. So I'm going to do that on each of the marks that we have all the way to the hem of the shirt. And remember, we are pinning this on the right side of the fabric. Now that we're done pinning it, I'm going to be taking the other end of the strip and I'll be aligning those on the marks on the other side of the center back. And just like we did previously, we're going to be placing the other end of the strip on the right side of the fabric. As you can see, I have finished pinning both areas, and this is what I have. So right now I have this strip of fabric and I already hemmed one side of the fabric. I will be placing the rough edge of this fabric right sides facing the fabric at the edges of the partition. Okay, so this is how I'll just place it. I would I have the second strip as well. I would also be placing it on the other side of the partition, and I'll be taking it to my sewing machine to stitch from top to bottom in order to cover up the raw edges of the fabric. I am back. I'll be taking out the pins and bending in the flaps, and I'll just be giving this a good press so that everything is flat and nice. Now that I'm done ironing, I'm going to be placing the yoke above and underneath the lower part of the fabric, and I'll be placing this yoke right sides facing the fabric, and I'll stitch across the areas I pinned. Once I've done that, I'll be bringing the front piece and I'll be aligning the shoulder of the front piece to the shoulder of the back. So once I just pin everything in place, I'm going to be taking the back yoke that is underneath and I would be just folding it. I'll be rolling the whole fabric upwards so that the back yoke encases the rolled up fabric, and then I'll be pinning both shoulders of the front and back yokes. Once we're done pinning, we're going to be stitching the shoulder area, but we're not going to be stitching the neckline. Once we are done stitching those areas, you're going to turn the fabric to the right side. And now you can see how the stitches inside look like. Look at the shoulder area. You can see that that area looks like an invisible stitch. You aren't seeing the stitches outside. That was what we're trying to achieve. Now when we try to align the hem of the fabric together, you can now see the come down we're talking about at the shoulder area. You can see that a little part of the back fabric has already come to the front as a result of that shortage we created at the front shoulder. So that was what we're trying to achieve. So I'm just going to iron this down with my pressing iron so that the come down is well defined and everything stays nice and neat. Now that we're done ironing, I'm going to be measuring 2 inches away from the center front on both sides. and I'll notch those areas I marked. After notching those areas, I'm going to be measuring from that area I notched all the way around to the other area I notched. So I'm just going to take my tape and pass it around from notch to notch. And after measuring, what I have is 13.75 inches, as you can see. By the way, I have this piece of fabric and I'll be doubling this fabric over, and this piece of fabric measures 13.75 inches. I would also be folding this again, and I'll just use my pressing iron to make it flat. Now this part here is on fold, so at this part that is on fold, I'm going to be marking 3 inches at the hem of the fabric, and at this other area that is not on fold, I'm going to be marking 2.5 inches at the hem of the fabric. And so I'm going to be connecting those 2 points together. Now I'll cut through the line. If I open up this piece of fabric, this is what I have. So I'm going to be placing this piece of fabric, the wrong sides now, on the hairstay. That is the hairstay with the part that has the glue. And I'll be taking my pressing iron to run it across the hairstay in order to activate the glue. So once I'm done, I'm going to cut out the excess hairstay 0.5 inch away from the sides, and I'll be stitching the top of this fabric and the sides, but I won't be stitching the bottom. So I've brought back the shirt and I would open up the inner allowance of the center front. You can see that I've hemmed that area with 0.5 inch. And I also hemmed the other area too with 0.5 inch. So right now I'll be bringing in the collar, which we've already turned to the right side, and I'll be placing the midpoint. I notched the midpoint, so I'm going to be placing that midpoint on the midpoint of the shirt. Okay, so that is on the midpoint of the shirt's neckline, so I'll just pin that there. Now I'm going to be taking one end of the collar to the other end where it is notched on the shirt. Okay, so I'm just going to put the other end of the collar on the part we notched on the shirt, and I'll still be doing that on the other side of the shirt as well. Now I'll be bending in this allowance that we folded inwards, backwards, so that it rests on the collar. So in other words, what I'm just doing is that I'm sandwiching the collar in between the folded allowance at the center front. So I'm just going to align that area so that it rests on top of the collar, and then I'll just pin it in place. Now whatever I do on this part, I'm also going to do it on the other side of the collar. After you must have done this to both sides of the center front and the collar, you are going to be stitching from one end to the other end. I have stitched that area and this is what I have, although the collar is still open. So now I'll be closing up the open end of the collar. I'm just going to be folding in the base of the collar by 0.5 inch, and I'm going to be aligning that on the raw edge of the shirt's neckline. So I'm just going to bend till it gets to the end, and I'll be stitching on top of the collar all the way to the other end. I have stitched close the collar and this is what I have. So I will just be arranging the shirt the way it ought to be, and I will just use my pressing iron to define the shape of the shirt properly. For the sleeve, I have this pattern I already drafted and I used the pattern to cut it out on my fabric. So if you want to know how I drafted the sleeve pattern, click on the link that pops up on your screen right now so you can watch the tutorial. Now I'll be attaching my sleeve to the shirt. So now when we're attaching this sleeve to the shirt, you are not going to be attaching it on this seam. You're not going to be attaching it on that joining at all. You know that there is a come up, okay? So I'm going to be attaching the midsection of the sleeve to that come up, that area that came up there, and I'm just going to be attaching the midsection to on that point as well, and I'm going to take it all the way round. So do not attach it on the seam, attach it on the part that comes up. And I'll be doing same on the other armhole as well. I have attached the sleeves and this is how it looks like. So I'll just be flipping this to the wrong side. Now I'll be closing up the shirt and I'll be stitching the sides of the shirt from the armhole by 1 inch all the way to the hem of the shirt. So I'll be stitching using 1 inch to stitch it by the sides. I'll do that on the other side as well, and I'll show you what I did. Now that I've closed up the shirt by the side, I will be opening up the side seams this way, and I will just be marking it somewhere around the waistline, and I'll just be pinning that area down. So I'm going to also do this on the other side of the side seam. I'm going to mark somewhere around the waistline, and I will still open up the seams and pin it down. Now that I've done that, I will be taking it to my sewing machine and I will be stitching along each side of the seam, okay, because I want to create 2 channels. Those 2 channels will be where I'm going to insert my drawstrings. So I have 4 strings of fabric here, and these strings of fabric is what I'm going to be inserting into the 2 channels that I created. So I'm going to be putting a safety pin on one end of these strings, and I'm going to be passing it through each of the channels, okay? So I'm just going to pass it till it gets to the waistline of the shirt, and I'm just going to pin it in place. I'm going to do same for the other areas as well, and make sure that it doesn't fall through the channel anyways. So I'm just going to do that for all the channels, and then stitch the area where the drawstrings end so that it is well secured. Now for the area where we folded at the center front, you're going to be stitching it from top to bottom. Remember that we folded in 0.5 inch allowance at the center front, so you're going to be running a stitch on both sides in order to keep that area down. So after you're done with this, we can see that we're practically done with the shirt. In case you want buttons on your shirt, you can go ahead and attach your buttons. And this is the final result. So I paired the shirt with a short which I made in the previous tutorial. So if you haven't watched the tutorial, or if you're interested in knowing how I made the short, you can click on this link that you see so that you can watch that tutorial. Thank you for watching. If this video was helpful, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'll be seeing you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.